the 20th RSTS birthday party. Will begin by leading us in song. Hey Vernon, I hear it's someone's birthday. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear RSTS. Happy birthday to you. The RSTS Development Manager. I follow in a long legacy of development managers, and like most development managers, my job in software is similar to tonight. Try to keep things moving and keep everyone fed. There are people here tonight, all of which had something good to do with RSTS. Either they did a nice thing for it, or it did a nice thing for them. For your 25 bucks, we're going to give you a show unparalleled. You're going to get dinner, a floor show, laughter, merriment. You get it all. Free gifts, raffles, and if you don't have a good time, we already have your 25 bucks. We don't care. I was asked to make a few announcements. There is no smoking, please. If you must smoke, do it tomorrow. Dinner will be served 5 minutes ago. We have some great RSTS memorabilia along the back. We ask one main thing: don't steal it. Some of it is very valuable, although most of it was scraped out of the bottom shelves of people's basements. We do have people posted next to the memorabilia who will in fact hurt you badly if you attempt it. Throughout the evening we will be doing waffles. Sorry, raffles. We'll be having raffles. And we have some wonderful gifts. We also have some giveaways. We didn't give you the giveaways now because we thought you'd take your giveaway and go away. The giveaways happen when you leave. If you do try to leave and come back, you will have your hand stamped at the door. There is no message board now. If you did happen to be foolish enough to tell anyone where you were tonight, they will not be able to get in touch with you. You can obviously determine that during RSTS's expansion years, Charles has been involved with RSTS and DECAS since about 1974. He currently serves as a technical consultant for a very large county school district, dealing with PDP-11 and RSTS systems. He's also had a variety of other jobs, including park ranger, a deckhand on a Great Lakes freighter, a commercial photographer, a lifeguard. Come on, Charles, I don't buy the... Charles, that's the last time I'm going to ask you to give me your bio. I would like Charles to come up now and say a few words.
I'm glad they turned it on. It brings back unpleasant memories. It reminds me that I'm considerably larger than I used to be. Well, good evening and welcome to the first of a series of VMS Aristus 32 migration sessions. Sorry, those are the notes for my fantasy convention next week. Having been told on at least 3 occasions that Aristus was dead, I can't tell you how pleased I am to still be alive. The theme of this evening, and I'm told I have 5 minutes, I plan not to use them. The theme of this evening is have a good time. Enjoy your friends, reminisce about the early days, swap war stories, have a decent meal, and listen to our witty MC this evening entertain us. 4 minutes. All right, I have 4 minutes. In the last minute, I just might read a few mottos from Aristus' past that will tell you how to enjoy the evening. The first one's on the board back here. There are 2 rather round-headed young people holding hands. It says something about sharing Aristus with a friend. Not too long after that poster came out, I recall another one that said something about 6C is sex.
Burpees. Number 5, about 10 reasons why I'm still with Aristus. Just to annoy my dead silver. Number 4.
That I write myself instead of him. Good evening. On behalf of the visible people here tonight, I'd like to express our appreciation of being invited to the 20th anniversary of the Aristus birthday party. When Paul asked me if I would say a few words, I said that's impossible. I can't say it. But anyhow, he called me a little while later and said, "How you doing on your speech?" I said, "Well, I'm about half done on page 26. He said, "Good, pick out the best one and give that." I cheated slightly. All right. Have you noticed that this week, people that have worked on PDP-11s or Aristus, they all tell how long they've been working on Aristus or PDP-11. They know that's true. I'm doing the same thing. That's how you establish credibility. But it does remind me of a story about a private in the Army who didn't know his left foot from his right foot and couldn't get out of the way of the E1. Finally, the sergeant took him to the lawyer and said, "Private, how long have you been in this Army?" And the answer came back, "All day, sir." Well, I've been with 11s a little bit longer than all day. Not much, but a little. My first job in 11s was product manager for IAS and RMS 11K. Now that's a real good combination. IS is our stepchild of the 11 operating system. We never figured out what we'll do with it. We still don't know what to do with it today. The only people that bought much of it was the government. Now that really figures, doesn't it? Now RMS 11K in the old days, old days, was the index sequential part of RMS that was sold separately. We find that smart and kind of
What's the future? Think to when you'll be back to Aristus. And the winning number is...
I won!
3-0-1.
Oh, there we go.
He doesn't have Aristus side. What are you doing here? How did you get in here?
Years ago, I had one.
We present you with this, and we hope you can enjoy it, reading it, not running it.
Get Aristus side.
We know it's out here somewhere because obviously it's here at Degas. Boy, I don't even know where to start. Does anyone have a CPU that they bought prior to 1980 that still has Aristus on it? If you do, stand up immediately. This is fantastic.
I don't know.
Do we have any 1120s out there still running? Not 97, that's for sure.
I think they're going to 40.
Okay, it's It's a dual of the serial numbers.
But we bought it. Does it matter when you bought it, or is it just the oldest machine?
Oh, the judge's decision is final. Bozo, a little help. 75? I'm sorry, I heard 85. Come up here, sir. What kind of a processor is this?
It's an 1140 BS.
Oh, I haven't even seen one of those.
It's running version 7 alongside of an 1144 running 96.
All right. I love you.
Thank God for the MS-11LD. We got rid of a whole core box.
Oh, whoa. Bozo's next award goes to the exact opposite person in here. The newest Ristus customer. Do we have any people that are very, very recent Ristus customers, like since 88? No, I didn't think we did. Oh, we're gonna back up. We're gonna do a binary search. Bozo says 80. Now, there must be someone who started running Ristus since 1980.
At your current site or anywhere?
All right, we got one? 7 something. I started with 7 something too, so you win. Carl, you got to stand up here with us though. Okay, I'm really sorry, Bozo screwed up. The next award goes to the person with the oldest running version of Ristus. That means still running on a CPU that you use for something. That could be an old CPU too, I wouldn't be surprised a bit. Do we have any people out
Call
there?
it 7C because we got used to it that way.
There's a 7-speed and a fixed 6-speed.
Oh, I can't get that.
6C? We have a 6C out there still?
No,
He said 7C.
it's a 7C.
The company started calling it the same way as it was on the 6. So the third set of patches they came in, they called it 707.
Oh, okay, so it was 7.0 Patch Kit C? Oh, okay. And what were you running?
We're running 7.0 on 40.
Ooh, up here.
Toronto, Canada.
Version 7.0 must have shipped in about 1978?
Yeah.
August 78.
I've been maintaining this on the phone. This is in Toronto, Canada. And we all had version 8 they just went up to version 9.7 all the places except Toronto, Canada. Why? Because we're Canadian. We never wanted to go there. Well, eventually we had to do phone support because the current manager didn't want to do it anymore. And so we started installing everything. We started realizing
This award is for capital still has not migrated to VMS. Serious, die-hard Ristus users. We're going to try to give this to anyone in the audience that still hasn't tried a VMS system. Is there one of those? Stand up, please. In-house. Yeah, we got 2. We got a couple. You've only tried them at Tikas, huh, Glenn? And you haven't tried them either? Stand up if you haven't. Is there anyone that's never looked at one? Have you shielded your eyes when you were going through the exhibit hall? This award's for you. No, nobody there. Stay up. I didn't think there would be. Migrated. 5 people still haven't migrated. Yeah. Paul's here to help me. This is going to go to some back system manager somewhere. He's going to put it up on his wall and say, look what I got. 25 bucks, 2 beers, and they give me this.
Give it to the one.
Oh, okay. The 5 people that admitted they still didn't have any VMS systems and then got embarrassed when I got real depressing. Stand back up for me, and come up here. Bozo says, come on up here, and stand in front of the podium. The decision of our judges will be final. Bozo thinks, and you may not respect Bozo a whole lot.
What's not to respect?
Forever. Just do us a favor and make them priority 5.
That's how they're treated.
Tell him it looks like one of his QAR responses.
No, the QAR responses say, thank you for your QAR. We will consider this suggestion for some reason.
This place is introduce this person and all that is. Okay, it's time for the event of the evening. This is a show that I trust you will enjoy, I know you will enjoy, and it's going to last till about 4 a.m. 4 a.m. This is a 6-hour extravaganza, non-stop. The restaurants are closed for the evening. I give you Mr. Peter Dick.
Okay, welcome to the year 2050. Today, as you know, is the 11th of June. To leave the office, climb into our taxi, or you can always catch the Dexpo shuttle and go back in time. Back in time. Let's go, in fact, back beyond 1970, back to when it all started. It started with MIT and work on the Project Whirlwind. As I'm certain you know, too, is a 16-bit machine. The first users were, of course, a variation on Star Wars. And going back, we have here on the left our first president, Mr. Ken Olsen. The late Mr. Ken Olsen. This is a recent shot of the Preservation Society of the Mill, where it all took place. The first real product from the corporation, the first computer as such, was the PDP-1. Now, for those spouses in the audience who are unfamiliar with this funny way in which we now work, the funny blob on the right, that is the Deacon's logo. For the old-timers amongst you, you may like to remember the original digital logo. And what about numbers? Digital has a funny way of skipping numbers. So we skip 2 and 3, and after the PDP-1, we go straight to the PDP-4. I would expect at some stage a little bit of oohing and ahhing. Okay, let's try and change the rules a bit. Those of you who remember go, ah, great, and the rest, remain silent. So, PDP and the next after 4, 5. Yeah, you're all too young. What about a PDP 6? Anybody remember that one? I see the pensioners have made it this evening. After the PDP 6, we couldn't find a 7, but here's an 8.
We could find 6 of the 7. Come on. That's the
No.
computer was on.
Thanks. The thing to remember about the 8 was the fact that 8 was the first operating system that allowed us to timeshare, TSS 8. And here they are queuing up to do their thing. After the PDP 8, there came the classic, the PDP 10. Now, the reason it was so classic was, of course, the number of lights it had. After the 10 came the 12. It was one of the world's first green computers. And then, of course, the 14. After the 14, the 15. The 16. And then, in 1969, the result of millions and millions of American dollars. Yes, you made it. You've got a man on the moon. Now, the funny thing is, it wasn't difficult to get in there. It was getting back that was difficult. And some people say that you sent the wrong man and he shouldn't have got back. According to folklore, 80 years, 3 months ago, there was a roll on the drums and Digital wheeled out the first on what was to become the most amazing success story of all our lives. The first PDP 11. Interestingly enough, in the very early days, it was produced by engineers. This meant that it did not have a model designation after the 11. It was simply one model. Then, the guys from marketing came along, and surprise, surprise, we had a range of computers. That's the 1120, the first. Now, using the most extraordinary technology, we are able today to bring you a hologram. A hologram so amazing that I hope you will all welcome warmly Mr. Tom Barnett, who was the first RSTS product manager to tell us about those days. Tom, please come.
I have my speech here from the 10th birthday party, but I'm not going to bore you with all that stuff. I will tell you a few key things. Who would like to know how we came up with the name RSTS?
Yeah.
All right. Nate Teichholz, who is the true father of RSTS, and unfortunately is not able to be here tonight, was working on a product first called Multi-User Monitor, speccing it out, and then he realized he couldn't have more than one language because he wanted to have a multi-language system like TSS-8, but because we didn't have memory protection. So he came up with the name BTSS. He was going to make a basic time-sharing system to compete with HP. It's 2000. I came up with some obscure reference that there was already a BTSS that RCA computers had. So we were trying to compete with HP, and HP had a very simple basic time-sharing system, and they had come up with an idea in the monitor being able to have multiple peripherals, and users could access peripherals. And he said, that's resource sharing. I said, okay, we'll call it resource sharing, time sharing system. So that's how I came up with the name RSTS. I had no idea, we ended up calling it RSTS, but that was the name I came up with. And he said, okay, we'll go with that. And the other thing was how we invented BASIC, might be interesting. Nate gave me a copy of a manual, user's manual from Timeshare Corporation, and said, Tom, find some statements in there that you think would be neat to put in BASIC. And this BASIC I'm going to invent, and I'll tell you whether we think we can do them or not. And so I went checking. I thought that was fun. It's like going shopping, you know. And so he said, no, we can't get that, do that one. And that was basically how he came up with the BASIC that we're going to put in this system. And so that's how we came up with BASIC Plus. And so I thought that was sort of interesting. The other fateful time is I remember sitting around in an office. I went out and helped sell basic Arista systems to sales reps all over the country in the early days, and this was before the thing ran, so it was easy to sell it. I never, Nate, I said, who knows about phase reviews in DEC, you know, all the engineers. In those days, we didn't do phase reviews. I would come back and say, Nate, we can sell a system to this guy if we could only add to the system this. And said, I'd think about it. The next day, he'd demo it, and hey, then I got the user documentation. That was a feature. That was sort of a shortcut on phase reviews. It also got us trouble because we had a meeting. I think, Mark, you were there in Nick Mazzarice's office sometime. And basically, we got ourselves into big trouble because we had all these customers we promised this stuff to, and we weren't delivering it all. And we made a long list of all the things we were supposed to do, and we came down to the question whether or not we should keep going with it or not. It was a pretty serious meeting. And we decided we would go for it, and that's when Mark Rampal came on board. He was sort of like the Superman. He came on board and said, I'll fix it, and he started paging. I remember Mark going through the documentation, just debugging code. It was sort of like, you know, Evelyn Wood speed reading. You know, we're finding bugs in the code, just flashing through it, marking it up. And we suddenly, I was really when we turned the corner, I think, because there were some pretty gloomy days in those days. In those days, I went out and taught some of the big customers Basic Plus, I built the projects, and there were some neat customers in those very early days. But I better just quit now before everybody goes to sleep. But I could go on and on about old war stories about the very early days. It was a different place and a different time. So it's fun to be here again. And thanks for inviting me to come.
So there we are. Now we're only 78 years ago. And the machine you see up there, of course, is the 1145, regarded by many as ahead of its time, as were several PDP-11s. So marketing was now starting to get interesting in this new product, the PDP-11. They needed a range to be able to sell to lots of people. One way was, of course, to make the same machine available as two model numbers.
Here you go.
First, the 1135, and its exactly the same brother, 1140. Not quite right to say exactly the same, because there were some differences. 1135s were sold to pirates who didn't buy software licenses, sometimes called OEMs. The 1140 retained the characteristic most enjoyed by DECA's people, switches. In those days, if you were wanting to write a program, you would no doubt sit down and try and hog the fastest, sexiest, most amazing 30 character per second LA30. And in order to have totally limitless online storage, the people who were writing the brochures told you that the RK05 was the bee's knees. Now I want you to understand the next phrase. This was the world's first industry standard rack-mountable disk drive that allowed you to have 4 systems in one cabinet, a staggering over 10 megabytes. In those days, there was a small, specialist, highly skilled software house called Evans, Griffiths and Hart. And I'd like now to call upon Tom Evans, who was part of the team, the E part of E, G, and H, in case you have difficulty with the language. Tom, please come up now.
All right. G and H send their greetings. Sorry. Alphabetically, I have to go. I guess what I remember most from the very early days there of trying to put Basic Plus together was the process we went through. You went down in the middle of the night sometime, you went down P10 and cross-assembled Ristus and cross-linked it. You punched an enormous box of fan-fold paper tape, you carried it upstairs, you hoped it would read in without jamming, without barriers, all that. It was an enormous breakthrough day when the duct tape service finally worked on Ristus, and you could carry a duct tape in your pocket out from the basement. Many stories like that from that period, but I'll stop there. Let me say, we're still using Ristus kind of peculiarly. Our use these days is as a data communications front end to larger systems. This may seem a little strange to you for Ristus, but it indicates the kind of flexibility, the kind of strange things that all of you have done with Ristus over the years. Let's see. I think I'll stop at that point and just say what a pleasure it's been to be around Ristus for this 20 years, and we'll count on the next 20 also.
Getting exciting, isn't it? Have you started to calculate how long you're here for? Occasionally in digital, that wonderful corporation, somebody is let loose and goes nuts. I'd like to present to you one of the classic examples of 1970 technology gone mad. The Data System 340. Now, the funny thing about it was that you actually got the desk with it. Yeah. This was the ultimate desktop. They gave you the desk. By 1973, 77 years ago, we were starting to make good use of our PDP-11 Ristus systems. The best use was, of course, to use David Earle's 101 games. It will come as no surprise to this learned audience to discover that one of the main reasons for the success of this book was, of course, Space War, written by Mr. Mike Mayfield. I realize that some of you in the back can't see properly, so here's a close-up. Still, there ends a happy business relationship. However, we must remember about those early pioneering development people. For example, the documentation that they were using. Some variation of DOS, they were programming macro. Ristus 11, that is, was almost a sunset, sadly. But I'd like you now, please, to welcome, in fact, to say hello, to Mr. Jerry Hornick, who was, of course, one of the Ristus product manager developers.
Actually, that slide is a very good lead-in to one of the stories I wanted to tell you. When, by the way, how many people here know what the original name of Ristus E was when it was first started as a project? See any hands? Mark obviously knows. Well, it turns out, we got one more. It turns out it was called Ristus 45 because it was designed as a project to take advantage of the power of the 1145. And sometime after the 45 was announced and the project was started, I joined the group, and took over as supervisor for Ristus Development because George Berry went off to Carnegie Mellon on a sabbatical. In any case, shortly after that, the 1140 was announced, and it was decided that since the 1140 and 45 were so close, and wouldn't it be nice if we could take advantage of both of those machines and run Ristus on both of them, we changed the name away from Ristus 45 and decided on Extended rather than 45. I remember about halfway through that project, which took about a year, it's sort of hard to believe, actually. RSTS was built by about 4 people in about a year. And I don't think we could build an editor in that amount of time these days. Anyway, but about halfway through that project, of course, the big thing was that people were a little cramped in 28K 1120s. When you think about the personal computers that you use today, think about what it's like to run 16 users on 28K or 56 KB of internal memory. Halfway through the project, of course, RSTS was going to provide us with 124K words. More space than you could possibly know what to do with. And I remember saying to Mark one day as we were sitting at one of the machines, you know, before a year goes by, people are going to be complaining, saying, what, we only have 124K to use? Anyway, the story about the hello was we set up what was then the largest PDP-11 in existence in building 1 of the mill, because we wanted to put together a real 1145 RSTS system, which actually had multi-platter disk pack drives on it, and as much memory as it could have, and so on. And we connected 32 real honest-to-goodness ASR 33s. You know, you show really modern devices when you showed that LA whatever thing. I mean, we used to run on ASR 33s. And what we did one day was to invite in a bunch of math teachers from New England, give them a great opportunity to come get a tour of the mill and hear all about digital and try out this new wonderful product by writing basic programs and all. And so they first met in a conference room, and Nate Teicholz gave them the introduction to RSTS. And of course, in the process of doing that, gave them some simple instructions on how to use this new product. And said, well, the first thing you do we're going to take you to where all the terminals are. And the first thing you do when you sit down at one of these terminals is you say hello, and then the computer will ask you for your username, and this is the username we'd like you to use, and then you enter this password. And sure enough, off we went with 32 math teachers, sat them all down at 32 ASR 33s to get real data on really 32 users on the thing. And this one teacher actually sat down in front of the ASR 33, looked it in the eye and said, hello. And nothing happened, and she kept saying hello until somebody came over and pointed out what the problem was. Anyway, that's enough for me. I got a million stories from those old days that maybe we get a chance to talk about later on. I'm really glad to be here. By the way, the person who followed me as product manager, Dick Angel, now works with me and was really sorry he happens to be in Europe right now, and so he couldn't come. But he sends his regards as well. So good luck for another 20 years.
Well, time's moving on. We've seen some machines, we've seen some people, and now it's time for some brochures. No relaxing, yes. So, they started off with RSTS. And here are no doubt some of the maths teachers. I know, I wish my like that.
Yeah.
Then, of course, somebody came up with the idea later on of calling it CTSE for commercial time sharing. Then they went back to RSTS. Then they went back to CTSE. Then they went back to RSTS. And during all that time, this is now the early 70s, that's the 1970s, of course. During that time, one man in particular really helped to get RSTS out. Originally, he was out there in the field trying to sell things and decided that he ought to join the team on a temporary basis in order to get the first release out. Please welcome warmly Mr. Mark Bramhall.
Yeah, not sure where they got that. I joined digital in 1970 as a marketeer. And along with Tom, we sold a lot of systems to a lot of schools. Unfortunately, what we didn't do is deliver a lot of systems to a lot of schools. So I went on loan on a temporary 6-month basis to get the first release out. And we did, we got a release out. I hand carried it in my briefcase on paper tape to one of the sites, installed it, and that night wrote the first ever utility, Systat, at that person's site, because we couldn't tell if it was running or not. I brought that back, and that was the start of the utilities for RSTS. That site also had a special configuration. They were the first ever multi-disk system. They had an RC11 and 2 RKO3s. Unfortunately, RSTS had no conception of this whatsoever. So we created something that became known as the Carleton Croc, because it was Carleton College in Minnesota, where we treated the entire 3 disks as one big disk, put some special inflection points in the disk driver low-level code, and marked the barriers between the disks, the logical block number that went from one disk to another as a bad block. So we never actually allocated files that spanned 2 of them. They ran that way for a number of years until version 4 came along, which actually had a real file system that knew about multiple paths. Next event that's sort of interesting was the fall decus at the Jolly Roger Hotel in Anaheim. The entire decus, all the people who attended, all the meeting rooms, everything was in the Jolly Roger Inn in Anaheim. That's where I met Bob Bratton, and he and I went out one evening after a party and continued a party, and basically the next meeting was when the SIG was formed, and I won't discuss actually where we went or what we did that night. I'll leave that to Bob when he comes up to the microphone if he cares to admit it to everybody. But that, I think, was the start of the SIG, and it was a very interesting time. One other thing I'll say, and people claim that I have this desire to do bizarre things with software. Right. I was in my office one time during the middle of the day when we had a time-sharing system up on 5.5 in the mill, and I discovered a bug by looking at the listings in the terminal service. I had a BTO5 in my office running a 2400 baud, and I figured out the patch for this bug. Unfortunately, it was right in the middle of the echo service of the terminals driver. So the only way that the bug could be fixed would be to disable echoing to bypass this code, enter the patch, then re-enable echoing. So I figured out the instruction sequence, got into ODT, logged in under 1.1 so I could do pokes, deposited the branch instruction so that the code would be bypassed, blindly typing, since input still worked, it was only echoing that didn't, put in the rest of the patch, then went back and restored the original instruction to let the code run again. The code I actually bypassed was the code that triggered the output on the DH11. So it was indeed buffering all the echo, it just wasn't showing. And as I did the last carriage return to do the last deposit, I crossed my fingers that indeed what I would see boom on the screen were all the echoes of everything being typed right. I actually made it. Everybody else in the building was, at that time, poking their heads out of the office saying, why isn't it echoing anymore? The And then boom, all of a sudden, all their echoes occurred. But the bug was fixed.
And now I hope that you all have signed your non-disclosure agreements. Tonight is my pleasure to remind you of a key event that occurred some 76 years ago. It was, of course, the announcement of RSTS version 4A, given to DECAS members under a non-disclosure agreement, for your eyes only, top secret, etc., etc. If we go back to these new features in version 4A, we Digital have now decided that we're fed up with doing all the sysgens. From now on, you can do it. But I want to tell you something, folks. We've added, within the system generation procedure, a new feature. This feature is in direct response to the first recorded wish list item. This is that you'd like to be able to...
Not knowing a single thing about 3-word math packages.
In fact, it came with 128 KB of memory and 2 Archaeo 6s. One of the many questions we get asked, those people who remember back some 73 years ago, is how good is the V machine? The answer is, according to Digital's own corporate slides, it's a perfectly pleasant, nice way to use computing. For example, here is a standard single-user system. However, the manager is concerned at the fact he's going to have to paint the back wall. So, according to the corporate slides, he picks up the DEC Direct catalog and has his system changed to a 780. It still only supports 1 user. Our next speaker should not, in fact, be following those particular slides. He, in fact, has come the furthest. He started as a software engineer, became a supervisor, then the program manager. I'm referring to Simon Sito.
First of all, I would like to say how glad I am to have this opportunity to see all of those many familiar faces from years back, even though it did take me a long way to get here. I have been with RSTS a number of years, and over those years, for one stretch, I went to 9 DECAS symposia in a row. And I have given a number of presentations or speeches. But finally, somebody came up and confided to me. He said, I don't even remember who it was. He said, Simon, you know, you really talk wonderfully, but after we hear you talk, we don't know what you said. I don't intend to make a long speech tonight. I could tell you all about the wonderful things that we did while I was associated with RSTS, but other people did do better than I. There were many happy memories and some unhappy ones. And I don't really know, if you ask me now, what it was that was most impressive in my mind that I did for RSTS, because I really can't think of a thing. I would like to think that I didn't really have an original thought in my head, and that all those good things that people thought Simon did, they all came from either the good team of people I had the fortune to work with, as well as all those users who over the years gave me a piece of their mind. I was somewhat responsible for some of those terrible slogans that Chuck Mustaine said that we came up with, the bumper stickers and things like that. And I also was not too proud to steal from E.F. Hutton But I didn't really believe in that. I believe that digital should listen to users. Certainly I did my best when I was on the shift, and I certainly hope that digital carries on the tradition. Thank you.
And now for that machine that we wonder why they made it. I think the answer is it's so that Alan Frisbee could have one in his basement. About the same time, we're now in the late 70s, the 1123 was produced, which set computing and the image of the RSTS system back a long time. The 1123 Plus, yes, I know it's strange, it's called a Plus and it looks less. And the one that's always hungry, the famous 1144. I've already made reference to the fact that the 1144 was often sold to OEMs, and I assume this official digital brochure cover was to remind us that most of the OEMs were cowards.
That's the aggregate sale.
Once again, the last slides have nothing whatsoever to do with our next speaker. Our next speaker was part of the development team responsible for DECnet coding and continues to give version 4A product announcements every 5 years. Please will you welcome Mr. Paul Koenig.
I was wondering if Peter gave advance notice to all these other speakers. Now I know the answer. That picture was taken before I joined the RSTS group. It's probably 1976 in Chicago, where I was representing Lawrence University, my alma mater. It's also around that time that I did my first development for the RSTS group without even the benefit of the DEC badge. When I came out to the Mill for a week to talk about a summer job, perhaps, and was put to work, said, we need a pin to our whole desk upstairs. We'll use it for word processing. I used to control my amateur radio equipment. Occasionally it gets a hard time because it doesn't appreciate having 100 watts of RF floating around in itself. But a few capacitors, I find that won't do. I still use DEC Mill 11 because it's the purest end-node mill system I've ever found. And credit goes to Mr. Goodranch, as he's known to all that know him, for that product as well as many other fine products. I also still use TIFO every day, or almost every day. Another fine product that was introduced to on RSTS. What can I say? It's where I learned to be a programmer. It's been the start of my career in DEC, and I very much enjoy working with it.
Birthday anniversary edition of the PDP-11 catalog. Another product which was subjected to being marked as an official corporate product, the Link. That's the end of the advertisements. Gene, you can relax now. In 1989, the RSTS UK SIG invited over from the States Mr. Vernon Miller, who gave us an amazing talk. None of which would have been possible without the help from some of the digital employees in the UK. One man in particular needs to be mentioned, Mr. Ken Surplus. If ever you see him, please simply go up to him, shake his hand and ask him for £5. Which brings me to our final guest speaker, the man who has to put up with us in the 60 years ago, it must be 1990. He's been with the group since 1982, and he's the system architect. I am, of course, once again referring to Mr. Fred Knight.
October of 1973. I started out using the public games account, logging into some of those 101 basic games that had been typed into the computer. I got up the nerve to ask for my own private account so that I could try typing in some of my own. So the first thing I did was, of course, folded one of those public games and started running it. When I got done, I took the little knowledge that I had acquired from a library book that I had checked out and started making some modifications. Well, I thought I was running my own program, of course, when I ran it, and my program did what it was supposed to do, and then the football game that I had been playing earlier all of a sudden started up. I sort of panicked. I didn't know what to do. I quickly Control-C, I ran it again to see if I really had destroyed the football game. And sure enough, I had. It was ruined, and I was scared to death. I had my first experience with the computer, and I had ruined one of the public games, so I quickly looked over my left shoulder, and my right, and did anything a normal college freshman would do. I logged out and got out of there as quick as I could. I had destroyed it. So the next week, I finally got up the nerve to come back. Only this time I brought the book with me. And I opened up to the page that described the new command. And I did it right this time. Well, that was 17 years ago. That was my beginnings with RSTS. Today, I look back and I can hardly remember even all of my IBM experiences. I used cards for about a week when we started doing some PL1 and Fortran stuff, and quickly learned that when submitting a batch of cards, it took a day to get the turnaround back. And of course, to make changes, it was almost impossible to get anything done in the time that the professors allowed. So I immediately proceeded to our RSTS system, which I knew had an RJ communication link. And I typed up my cards into the editor in the RSTS system and shipped them down through the RJE link, and I got my response back in 5 minutes. And nobody else in my PL1 class could figure out how I could get 20 jobs turned around in a day. So what do I look to now?
When digital continued to make new computers every 5 years for the PDP-11. And I can't hold this up much longer, thank you. This is all, and therefore you can imagine my pleasure to remind you that it was 60 years ago when some of the original wish list items from some 18 years previously were finally secretly coded. This is in the true tradition of the RSTS development team and the language people. Quietly working dead of night, they have coded in the two most requested items, rand% and date%. And of course, Mr. Bill Hancock, please. Still, time moves on. It's time now to go to 1991. After all, that's only 59 years ago, and I'm certain you remember who was it who took over as president of Digital when the first president, Mr. Ken Olsen, retired. I'm certain you remember that was just after Apple took over Digital. But my favorite memory from the it must have been the middle 1990s, was the way in which the J11 chip changed. Originally, when the J11 came out, the board implementation was called an 1173. This was a quad-size board, the greatest people in the world.
We can do that. So if you're really about to... For God's sakes, don't fight over them. Martin, you can only have one. I'm sorry. Okay.
Again, thank you.
call the speaker. Let's go. And now, I'd like to thank those people who helped put tonight together. The RSTS Birthday Committee. And now, there's a few special people who really busted ass to make this happen.
Well put, Glenn.
Yeah. And for them, we have a plaque that says, in sincerest appreciation to Gene Davis for extraordinary effort. Mr. Paul